Here's a very quick video outlining the basics of Annihilation for Marauder. So it's a dot spec, a damage over time. You have 3 dots that you apply to your target: Deadly Saber, Force Rend and Rupture. You have an ability called Annihilate, which is just a heavy hitting melee ability. The only other abilities that you'll be using Vicious Slash a lot. You'll basically be spamming this all the time. Whenever it's procced, you'll use Dual Saber Throw, and when available you use Vicious Throw, which is like an execute, but you can only use it on targets below 30% health. The only other ability, offensive ability, that you will use is Smash, and you use this to spread your dots from one target to another. Otherwise, you're not going to be using anything else. You don't tend to use Battering Assault. You may do if you run out of Rage. You don't ever really use Ravage. Maybe if you need a little bit of extra Rage. You never use Force Scream. The only time you would use it is if you were far away from a target and you couldn't approach it and you wanted to do a bit of damage, and you never really use Sweeping Slash either. So the main abilities, though, they're your dots, Annihilate, and then basically what we call filler abilities, which is Vicious Slash, procced Dual Saber Throw. When I say procced, I mean when the button lights up, and Vicious Throw. So just a couple of basics about Annihilation Marauder. The reason it's very good is because when you build your Fury and you get Berserk, Berserk makes your dots crit, and it also makes your dots heal the group. So basically Annihilation Marauders heal your group, which really helps out healers. I mean, it's just useful in general. They also heal themselves passively, so they're very good for that. They have a raid buff, Bloodthirst, which increases damage done by 10% for 10 seconds. So this is very good in raids. And you also have Predation, which is a speed buff, and it increases everyone's movement speed by 80% for 10 seconds. It also increases your defenses by 10%, so it's like a minor defensive, but it's just a really, really overpowered ability. And they also have some quite nice defensive cooldowns. You have Saber Ward, 25% damage reduction. You have Undying Rage. I don't usually take this, I take Mad Dash instead, which means you can dash to things, get out of the way. But also, interestingly, you have Cloak of Pain. I mean, all Marauder specs have this, but Cloak of Pain reflects damage back to enemies and refreshes itself. So if you have a dot on you, or if there's AoE that you can stand in, a lot of Marauders pop this, and it does extra damage. So that's the main thing about Annihilation. Unlike Fury and Carnage, it doesn't really have a set rotation. It's more of a priority system. And there's one very specific thing, so your Tactical Spiteful Saber. Basically what this does is every time you use Vicious Slash, Dual Saber Throw or Vicious Throw, your Rupture dot is refreshed on the target. So what that means, essentially, is once you've put Rupture on, you never have to replace it. It will always be on the target. If it falls off, it means that you've done something wrong. So basically, the entire spec is you put Rupture on a target, you use Deadly Saber and Force Rend, essentially off cooldown, and then when you're not using these abilities, you use Annihilate or Vicious Slash, Vicious Throw or Dual Saber Throw as a filler ability. So remember, these ones will keep refreshing Rupture. There's a few sort of nuances to the spec. For example, there's going to be optimal times to use Deadly Saber, and you only want to use Berserk at certain times as well. But for the very basics, you apply your dots and then you maintain them whilst doing single target melee damage. As for your stats, as DPS you always want, I think it's 2694 is your minimum accuracy. The reason you want this is anything below means that bosses and enemies above level 80, you have a chance to miss them. So all DPS, no matter the case, you always need over 2694 accuracy. Not too much over, otherwise it's wasted, but because I've got like high gear, I'm a bit over it. Same with alacrity. You always want to get I think it's 2054. Alacrity means that you have a 1.4 second global cooldown. I've opted to get a bit more to compensate for sort of server lag, and I like a little bit more. And with crit, you want to get 3000. I mean, with most people have 336 item rated gear. So basically you want to aim for 3000 crit, 2100 alacrity, and let's say 2700 accuracy. And you can pretty much get that with 336 gear. You will have to put augments in your weapons. You can see I've got the gold augments, and I've got slightly higher stats because I've got 339 item rating. Also, if you're doing raiding, you'll want to ensure that you've got level 700 biochem, which means you can use reusable stims and reusable adrenals and med packs. Also remember that as a DPS you're almost always going to be using a proficient stim, which adds 264 accuracy. So when you're gearing, account for using proficient stim. But anyway, so that's the stats. But basically, there's also another slight nuance. Right at the bottom here, level 23, you've got two abilities that you might change. One is called Juyo Rend, and one is called Draining Center. Essentially for single target bosses that you never change, and this is where Marauders are best really. On a fight where you never swap targets, you want to use Draining Center. But for a fight that you're hopping around, you're attacking different things, different adds, you've got downtime on a boss, you want to use Juyo Rend. Draining Center means that whenever you use Berserk, your force rend damage is doubled. So this makes the rotation slightly sort of rigid, in that basically you always have to use force rend after Berserk. But if you use Juyo Rend, you don't have to worry about that. You just use, ideally, Berserk when you've got 2 or 3 stacks of Deadly Saber, but you just spam Force Rend as soon as it's off cooldown. With Draining Center, you might have to wait a little bit. But regardless, the basic Marauder strategy is that before combat, you always use your channeled ability. As you can see, that means we're building Fury before combat. It means Berserk is ready to use. Also means your raid buff's ready to use. Oh, actually I don't have it on this character, but there is a tactical called Hidden Power, where Force Camouflage generates Rage. So what a lot of people do, and you'll need to do this in high level raiding, is you put Hidden Power on, you then Force Camo, and your Rage builds up here. Make sure you switch back to Spiteful Saber before combat starts. And what that means is you can pre-cast Deadly Saber before you leap in. But essentially, what you do, I'll do this very slowly, is we're not going to pre-cast anything, we're just going to leap in. You'll put Deadly Saber on. I'm using Battering Assault here to get some rage. You'll put Rupture on a target. You'll put Force Rend on it, and then just use your abilities. Annihilate, Deadly Saber. I'm going to use Vicious Slash. Oh, used it a bit too slow, but look, Rupture's here. Every time you use Vicious Slash, you can see it's being refreshed. You can see my stacks here of Deadly Saber are building. So when we want to use Berserk. I've got 2 stacks. Let's use it now, for example, with Force Friend. And then that's going to do more damage. You saw a procced dual saber throw there. So you're essentially just using your abilities to keep Rupture on the target, and then you're just using them as they come off cooldown, keeping Rupture on, proc dual saber throw, Force Rend. I'm delaying it a bit here because I don't have Deadly Saber. 2 stacks, use Berserk and Force Rend, and that's all we're doing really. So we're keeping Rupture on the target, and we're using our abilities as they come off cooldown. And that's all you do. And the more you do it, the more you'll get into it. And it's as simple as that, really. It's probably, well, it is much harder than Carnage or Fury, which have very static rotations. You just do the same thing over and over again. But Annihilation, once you get the feel of it, it's not that bad. All you're doing is you're keeping Rupture on the target. You're using Berserk. When you can, you'll notice the healing numbers are popping up here. If I was in a group, I'd also be healing a group. And that's it. Pretty simple. The only thing that you might do differently, so let's say my companion Rune Mark here was an enemy. What I might do is I might use Slam, and all the dots here that are on this target would be transferred to Rune Mark. And that's it. That's simply all you're doing as Annihilation, is you're putting your dots on the target, you're maintaining them, you're using your abilities as they come off cooldown, and you're maintaining your Rupture stats. And it's as simple as that, really. As I said, there was a speed buff, so you can see we're running. Let's put Predation on. You can see you move much faster. That's great. We've got a raid buff. That's going to increase our damage. And we've got some nice defensives as well. But that's it. So I hope that kind of helps. That's the basics of Marauder. There's obviously a lot more to the class, but I can go through those once you sort of get more comfortable with it. So yeah, I hope that helps.